Well, we're going to combine two requests into one here. The one person asked, would you do a video on how to paint with broken colors? And then the other one says, I would enjoy a quick lesson in the Open Impressionism style coined by Erin Hansen. Goes on to say, I love the colors that she uses, but when I look at a landscape, I cannot envision or imagine the colors that she's using, or that she sees and uses in her paintings. Well, we'll break a few strokes. The reason this works to do these two requests together is that what Erin Hansen does is broken strokes. What the Impressionists did was with broken strokes. Broken strokes means that rather than blend, two colors are placed side by side in broken brush strokes. One color with one stroke, another color with another stroke. Sort of that's a little bit overly simplified, but that's what they're doing. And what she's doing here, and I should let her speak for herself because she has a website and she's still going strong, but I'm not sure she has a YouTube channel. So I'll just base this quick tip on what she does and what the Impressionists did, and you can see the difference. Now, to address the second request, that this person says, I can't look at the colors and imagine what she sees. Look at the colors and call them by their names. If you'll look at this one, this particular painting, it sort of really spells it out. Within that sunset sky, if you look at these colors and then look specifically at the colors you're seeing, then you can actually see how there will be gray that's stroked with some strokes, maybe a darker blue gray you see right here, that is another stroke. There are the oranges here that are other strokes, the lighter yellows here, still other strokes, and the blues with others. Now, what she's calling Open Impressionism is done with broad brush strokes and also more vivid colors, whereas the Impressionist, and Claude Monet is one who really sings out in the Impressionist style of painting, the original Impressionism. The same principle is used, but it's smaller brush strokes. Rarely are you going to see in the original Impressionist the broader brush strokes, and also the colors that the Impressionists used or interpreted a little bit more subdued. So now that I've given you that sort of introduction, I'll just give you a brief demonstration that shows you how that works. Now, I'm not going to use a variety of colors. I want to show you more the technical aspect of how it works. And then you can take that and observe the differences if you're interested in doing the broken brush stroke technique. It's not a style, it's a technique. And the use of that technique is what created the style. It doesn't mean that you can't use that technique in other kinds of paintings too. So it's just a matter of the colors are broken up by strokes rather than being blended together. All right, so first of all, what I want to do is I'll show you the difference in all three. Blended, broken, and then broken with smaller strokes and broken with the larger strokes. So I'm just going to use one color of blue and varying values of that color to show you how that works. So I have here a blue that I have mixed that is what you might think of as, we could call a blue of the sky, a blue that we might see in some areas of the sky. And I'm just going to show you here with this blue variations in values of the blue rather than variations in colors. So if we were painting a sky, but using the blending method, it would go something like this, where we would start with, you might say start with a darker part of the sky. Let's just do that right here. It might not be quite that dark. Well, you never can tell. It depends on the time of day and where the sun's located. but you would do something like this, where you would then, as you come down into as the sky moves down, you blend it. You blend it so that you get a gradation, a smooth gradation of the sky at its higher up in the sky, and then as it comes down to the horizon. So we would then blend, and we would simply blend by crisscrossing the strokes. There are many methods of blending, and it depends on how smooth you want it blended. I prefer my blends to be relatively open, meaning that the blend is not so complete that you don't see something of the brush stroke left. Those of you who've worked with me know that I really love to see the evidence of the brush stroke left. But if you keep blending, you can get that relatively smooth. Now that is not what these people ask for. That is our traditional method of maybe painting a la prima, or painting in layers, whatever you're doing. That is the blend. Now, if the Impressionists were doing that, well, depending on the size of canvas, if they're using a very, very large canvas, then they might use a brush about this size, because the brush stroke would be small with in proportion to the size of the canvas. But since I'm working in a small space here, I'm moving to a different size brush. So what the Impressionists back in the original Impressionist day, what they might do is they might, where the sky is the darker there, let me just get that a little bit lighter, then they might go throughout a space like this and maybe make it just a little bit darker. And they might, some will do it as they go, some would paint the darker in, and then they would go in with maybe a different color or a different value of that color, and then rather than blend it, place that stroke right beside the previous stroke. So it would work something like this, and the eye does the blending. Now, if you've ever seen in a museum or gallery, usually they are in museums, the original Impressionist paintings up close, you can see these strokes. You can see the brush strokes, the brush stroke of the lighter value or of a different color. You can actually see those get right up next to it, and it looks like just a bunch of strokes. But when you stand back from it, your eye actually does the blending, and it looks more graded. If you stand back far enough, it actually appears very much like this does. So within that area right there, they would keep the value, if they were doing this sort of thing with those individual strokes, they'd keep the values close enough so that would blend visually. And then as they come down to get the gradation, they would, the darker color or that would appear here, and by the way, these strokes don't have a particular pattern. They're just, we might call them random strokes. Now there was the extreme Impressionist, post-Impressionist, actually Seurat, who did tiny, tiny little dots, and it was very precise. It looked very much like remember the old color TVs that you could get up really close to it and see all those little pixels. But the original Impressionist would use just a random type of brushstroke, meaning that the brush didn't necessarily move in one direction or other, and just sandwich these values in between, or changing, if it were changing color, they just sandwich it in between a lighter value in between a darker value. And if you're doing it as they want a sky to appear, then they might do something like that, and they continue then working down like that. Let me get that just a little bit more. You see what I'm talking about? All right, so those are broken strokes, meaning that each stroke has its own value, or each set of strokes as they go across would have their either own value or own color. Now, that's the smaller brush stroke. The kind of stroke that Aaron Hansen uses is a larger stroke. So that stroke then, for considering the size of the paper here, and the same thing, that stroke would be done much larger. And I noticed that what she's doing here, sometimes the actual brush strokes themselves will actually be connected to each other and moving within a color or value area. In some of her paintings you will see the strokes that are actually more broken, but this works like this. And you can go look at her work and detect, don't just look at it for the images, but look at it closely and detect the technique of the stroke itself. So the very large areas of broken color, and then if she detected that there is a gradation here, rather than make a gradation, that would go a little bit lighter. The areas that would appear next to it would go a little bit lighter. Something sort of like that. And then if it, as a build a gradation, you can see now, you see that how you would take something that's gradated and break it into 3 different values like that, rather than like this. It's just another way of painting. But if you look closely, let's see, in this painting, you can see something of that. You can see it right up in here and here, and as she brings the values, and you see it a little bit in the river here, how she does that. So you can see the difference. It's just a matter of looking. If you see a color that's gradated, such as you see in the sky, instead of blending that, you simply break up those values. Not extremely. Maybe if it's a gradation like this, maybe break it up into 3 distinct value areas rather than to have it gradated across. Whereas in the original Impressionism, the broken strokes, each set of strokes will be painted in a single value. Now the same is true for changing color, which I don't need to show you here because it's just the technique. If you'll notice here, and get up close here and notice what's happening here. Each change of color is side by side. They don't get blended, but your eyes will blend them if you're standing away from it. So that's pretty much the scoop on the broken stroke. You might just get, you can go into Pixabay, which has a lot of pictures to choose from. Sunsets are wonderful subjects to practice techniques from. So you might just type in the search bar of Pixabay, you might just type sunsets, and then you'll see an array of colors. Just play with this, and if you like both, if you'd like to experiment with both, where you're going to experiment with the original Impressionist style or the style that Erin Hansen calls Open Impressionism. In the original Impressionist style, what you would do is pretty much take the colors that you see, but rather than blend them, every time there's a change in color, you change the color, but you put them side by side rather than blending them together. And then if you want it to go on into what she calls Open Impressionism, you would just use higher intensities or more saturated colors or hues of those same colors. So instead of going as desaturated as this area is in here of Monet's, you see she's gone more saturated. So that just means that you have less saturated colors. In fact, when you look at her work, you see a whole lot of saturated colors, but because of the way she puts them side by side and works them in with the more neutral colors, it works. So give that a try, trying both the broken strokes in the Impressionist style and what Erin calls the Open Impressionism with the broader and more intense strokes. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.